Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. And today's guest is Greg Williams. And Greg, welcome to Leveraging Leadership.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
Beautiful. So you are here to talk to us about supply chain operations. You're an expert in that. And also a little bit about vendor risk mitigation. So by way of background, can you just do a brief intro of who you are and your background and how you got into this space?
Sure. Thank you. My name is Greg Williams. I'm based in Michigan. And I've been working in technology ever since I got out of college in the late 90s. I was an economics major in college, but always was a computer geek and gravitated towards working on PCs and playing with technology. So I decided to try to find a job in the software businesses, and I did. Then a few years at my second job was at an ERP partner, which is similar to what we do now. We implement business systems for small and mid-sized companies. So I've been doing that ever since 2000. And that's been my career. So when you're in the business system space, you either have to gravitate towards supply chain or accounting or IT. And I ended up working most in the supply chain area. That was most interesting to me. I enjoy working with manufacturing and distribution companies.
And you had a partnership with Microsoft. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So back in 2001, I started working with a system called Mitigation, which was out of Denmark and was a accounting system and distribution and manufacturing system for small businesses. And we found it, said, whoa, this is really new stuff. It was all Windows-based, which back then a lot of systems were still character-based. And we started working with it and selling it. And then in 2002, Microsoft purchased that company. And so I've been on that Microsoft train ever since.
And so how does that work? I know they have different levels of vendors or partners, and you're like the preferred or platinum category of those.
Yeah, so we're a gold partner, but that's not that special. I think 60 to 80% of partners are gold partners nowadays. But we're one of Microsoft's top managed partners.
Okay.
Which really means that we don't have to always go through their portal to get an answer. I can call people over there. We had meetings with them. We work strategically with their executive team on product roadmaps, as well as their product team on supportability and where we see possible improvements in the software.
Okay. And just for a context refresher for people, what is an ERP and where does that sit in overall business?
Yep. I try not to use acronyms, but ERP I probably use too often. ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. It's really the backbone to a business. It's the system that does everything. It does accounting, it does sales orders, it does purchasing. It often will do manufacturing and or warehouse management as well. It's typically your system of record for inventory. When you get audited, it's the system that your auditors spend time in looking to make sure all your numbers are correct. So it's really that backbone of the business. Other common systems are, SAP and Oracle that do the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. So when someone is at the point in the business where they're looking for ERP solutions, what types of things should they be looking at? What types of factors or questions should they be asking in that process?
Well, it depends on their size and where they're at. If they've never had an ERP before, then they're usually a smaller business that may have started off on something like QuickBooks.
Yep.
And eventually you will outgrow QuickBooks. And what a lot of companies do is they start off by, they'll buy QuickBooks, then they'll buy maybe a shipping system, and then they'll buy a CRM system. And before you know it, they have 4 or 5 disparate systems running their business. And they work great for every individual department, until they have to communicate with each other.
So you kind of bolted on these different separate systems and kind of kludged them together.
Yeah,
And then there
not
becomes
even bolted on in some cases. In some cases, small businesses are just running them disparate. Yeah.
and then at some point, the company reaches a tipping point where, hey, QuickBooks Online is fantastic if you're a small, medium business for a long time. But there comes a tipping
Right.
point where maybe it makes sense to move to an entirely different platform and consolidate some of these efforts.
Exactly. Yep. You got it. And then the other advantage that comes from going to a system like Microsoft's Business Central system, for example, which would be a step up from QuickBooks, is that you now get access to the Business Central consultants. Don't just know how to train you on the software, but they've done this for lots of other businesses, and they have business process expertise that you can learn from.
Okay. So if I'm in the shoes of a chief of staff or an executive listening to this, and I'm like, all right, we're at a growing company. We do use systems like QuickBooks Online right now, but we're kind of getting to the point where we're outgrowing them, but it kind of still works. First question for you is, what would you say to look for as signs like, yeah, you're kind of ready to move over to a larger system here?
One of the first things that I do is say, show me all your spreadsheets. Show me all the spreadsheets you're using to track things. And then someone has to say, okay, when this customer has this request, I put it in this spreadsheet, and show me all those that you're using to keep track of different things within the business. Because I guarantee your business users will have all kinds of spreadsheets you don't even know about. A lot of those could be systemized.
Okay. So take an inventory of what the process is today and how many manual separate steps are involved.
Exactly.
And say, all right,
Yes.
well, it just makes sense to kind of, no, I was going to say wipe that all out, but transition all of that into a system.
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, the ROI points for an ERP system are you're going to have reduced cost of audit if you get audited, because everything's in one place for them to look at, and they're just not going to question it as much. You're going to have, if you have any inventory, you're typically going to be able to reduce your inventory carrying cost and have more turns. If you're more of a subscription billing company, then you're going to handle that process much more efficiently. And you're also going to be able to properly, accrue costs and report on those and forecast that revenue better. And then the last one, and this is a little harder to measure, but it's real, is just reduced labor of manually handling processes.
And maybe reduction of redundancy, like duplicate work.
Right.
Okay. So can you take me through just like a high level example of, let's say, a manufacturer, like physical goods and services, and then you mentioned a subscription-based model, maybe something online or digital.
Right. So within a manufacturing company, they will, and in a lot of cases, when we run into manufacturing companies, a lot of times they're running older systems that they've had for many years. And, but they still, so it might not be like a QuickBooks example, but they're running an AS400 or something very old. And it doesn't communicate well with the outside world. It doesn't communicate well with other systems that they have. So, they're looking to modernize their technology stack. But at the same time, they may have a lot of bespoke or custom functionality they've built out in that legacy platform over the years.
Right.
And we have to help them replace that. And that's where the business process consulting comes in, to be like, hey, I know you've done it this way in the last 15 years, but if you maybe change your process to do it the way this new software works, then you're going to have a more efficient process and we won't have to change the software.
And that's what you and your company does, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And just to follow-up question on that, do you come in and do an assessment? Like, just like, hey, if I want to know where I'm at today with my current state, do you come in and say, all right, here's, equivalent to a car, like 300-point inspection, here's your report, here's how you're doing today?
Yeah. So our sales team does that. They come in and they do an inventory of all your current systems
Okay.
and how you're using them and what you're using them for. And then we kind of do a side by side. We say, okay, here's the list of your current systems and here's the new system and what we're replacing it with. And
Mhm.
occasionally we may have some bolt-ons or add-ons that we need to do to the Business Central system. But in a lot of cases, we're replacing, 5 or 6 systems with 2.
Okay. And would it be a case where once you map that, you can say, we can project you're going to save this much in old inventory. Like you're going to have greater control of your inventory and save this.
Yeah.
Now, the customer or the prospect might go, all right, like, yeah, that's marginal. Okay, I see your point, but we're going to wait a year to flip over. But we'll call you then.
Right.
You're able to show them, like, here's the pros and cons, here's the puts and takes, so they can make intelligent decisions about the timing of that.
Yeah, that's very common. We've been doing this 30 plus years. We build long-term roadmaps for our customers. Most of our customers are with us for 10 years or more.
Okay.
So we have no problem coming in and spending the time with you. And then you call us back in a year or two when you're ready to do it.
Okay. What, how does a company use acquisitions to their advantage?
So we have a lot of customers that end up acquiring other companies. And having a solid ERP is really important to have when you do that. We get customers that are acquired too. And the first thing happens usually when they get acquired is they get more investment in their systems.
Okay.
They want to add on more functionality. They want to optimize the usage. Maybe they want to upgrade the latest version. We see all kinds of that investment when one of our customers gets acquired. When our customers acquire other companies, then if you have a strong backbone business system ready to go, then you can roll them into that.
Okay.
And that allows you to increase their efficiencies as well.
Okay. So if someone was going out for a vendor selection, just in general, objectively, what are things that they should look for a good vendor?
So I'm glad you asked that because I like to discuss the different things to think about here. So a lot of times our customers go out and they try to find an app that they want to integrate into Business Central. Business Central, for example, has 4,000 apps in the Microsoft App Store. It's like the iPhone app thing. There's just so many of them, you can never catalog all of them. And so a customer will lead often with what is the functionality that I need? And let's say we're talking about expense reporting and expense management, very common one that almost everyone needs. Maybe there are 10 different apps to choose from. The customers will choose the one that has the features they like best and the user interface they like the most.
Right.
And then they'll bring it to us. And what I look at is other more soft factors. So is the company based in the US? If not, do they have support staff here? If they have support staff overseas, what are their hours? Is this company viable? Is it a real company and how many employees, or there are many apps that's just a guy in his basement, right? So we look at all those things and then we come back and say, hey, I know you like this app because it had the most functionality, but there's another one that has a much better support system behind it. And it's second in functionality, but it has all the support behind it. And by the way, we have 50 other customers already using it. So, and if I have 50 customers using one app, then now I have something called leverage. Go back to that app maker and be like, hey, there's a new feature our customers would like. Would you consider adding it?
Yeah.
It's one customer adding it, one customer asking, they're not going to do it. But if I'm representing 50 customers, then I have a much better chance of getting what we want out of that app
You also
developer.
have data points. If you're saying I have 50 customers and 40 of them are asking for this thing, then that's a thing that you should be providing to the market.
Exactly. Yep.
And then to flip it, is there something like vendor risk mitigation? So you kind of talked about that, but is there anything where here are the red flags? Like if you see this, run far, far away.
Yeah. I would say that if they don't have references that are easy to contact and or that they can instantly provide some proof of evidence as to how they work with your system and how they work with similar companies, then that's something to run away from. And then another thing that we run into quite often in our world is vendors advertising integrations that don't exist.
Ooh.
So Microsoft has lots of different Dynamics applications, and certain salespeople at vendors were happy to say, we integrate with Dynamics. And a customer won't always ask another level deeper. And I would say, well, this customer is running Business Central, the cloud version. Do you integrate with that? And then often you get, oh no, we integrate with a different flavor of Dynamics. And if I wasn't there to ask that question, they would have bought it and then found out later it didn't really integrate.
Yeah. So the customer knows what they want, but they don't necessarily know the right questions to ask.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of can pull the hood open and say, okay, like here's what you're really asking for. Or I totally understand that you want that. And here are the best ways to actually get there.
Right. That's exactly it. And then we also know how to ask, what is the process for installing your product? How long is it going to take? How many resources should we have ready to test it? Does your implementation price include support or not? We know how to ask all those detailed questions.
Because they'll sneak in little fees and admin and integration and onboarding, all those different sneaky.
Like if I was going to build a new house, I wouldn't know what to ask. I would want some builder or contractor to help me know what to ask.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So talk a little bit about who you typically work with. Are you industry specific, industry agnostic, or is there a certain size of company you work with?
Yeah. So our customers are typically between 10 million and 250 million in revenue. Sometimes smaller because we get customers that say, hey, I don't want to, serial entrepreneurs especially say, I don't want to start off with a QuickBooks style system just to know I have to replace it 3 or 4 years down the road.
Oh, okay.
But you got to start off with the system from the get-go. We get that sometimes, but in general, it's about 10 million and up. Manufacturing, distribution, professional services. We have a pretty broad skill set of who we work with. Who we don't always work with very often are nonprofits, public sector, government agencies, those types of things. That's a more specialized skill set. But we will work with a lot of small to mid-market companies that in consumer packaged goods, for example, that import things on containers and sell them to Target or Walmart. That's a perfect customer for us.
During COVID, supply chains ground to a halt. How did you help your customers overcome that, or at least have visibility into that? What was that like?
Yeah, we mainly helped them by having the visibility.
Okay.
So into where things were in the process. And also we have our own IP for calculating landed cost. And landed cost is taking the cost of a container and spreading that across the cost of the goods you have. So if I have 1,000 widgets on a container and the container costs me $2,000 to import, then I got to put $2 extra on each one as my cost. And that was really important in the pandemic because container costs went up 5-10x in some cases overnight.
And that just eats the margin. And sometimes you're underwater, I would suspect.
Yeah. So we were able to at least give them visibility to, hey, right away, here's what your landed cost looks like and where you need to price your things. Whereas if you're trying to do all that in spreadsheets, you were a month or two behind.
Yeah. What do you foresee? Right now, things have gotten a lot better than during COVID, but there's still kind of spots where things get stuck. And You never know what's going to happen geopolitically. What do you foresee in the near future with supply chain operations?
Well, what we've seen is everyone doubling down on their supply chain expertise.
Mm,
There's been some articles in Wall Street Journal that I've read, and some of the other large business applications, that the the COO or the chief of supply chain are the guys that are going to be the next CEOs in some cases, because everyone realized how important they were during this time frame. Typically, CFOs have been running this part of the business. Um, and so what I see is everyone wanting very efficient, visible supply chains.
mhm.
So when this happens again, they're ready for it, or just in general, there's no downside to them. You're just running a more efficient supply chain.
Do you see people trying to diversify, meaning, all right, we learned our lesson, we got burned over here when this supply chain that worked well for us for a long, long time just totally stalled, or we had spoiled goods on that container, and then they've changed their delivery model or they've changed something about their product. Do you see people diversifying in that sense?
We are seeing that. You're seeing some movement of manufacturing back to the United States or to more friendly countries. You're seeing chip manufacturing come back to the U.S. So and when that comes back, that I think other goods are going to follow that,
Yeah.
especially more complex, high tech manufacturing. I think we'll see more of that come back to the U.S. It just makes a lot of sense. And at the same time, costs in some of these developing countries have been increasing. As they get a better economy, then labor costs more. So the idea of doing it over there and then importing it isn't as attractive as it used to be.
And then do you help people with that mix? Let's say they come to you and are like, Greg and team, um, you know, we don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket, but we don't have the opportunity to swing everything over. Would you recommend a 50-50 split for our traditional supply chain and then a new one? What are the options
Yeah,
for our particular goods? How do you help with that?
we're probably not going to recommend the change in their supply chain strategy. Hire another consulting firm to do that, but we will tell them what we can enable
Okay.
them and how we can support them. So we say, hey, if you decide to go, open your own manufacturing plant, no problem. We're ready for that. If you decide to outsource everything to 3PL warehouses, then we can help you there too.
So,
Um,
so the chief supply chain officer says, here's the strategy, here's our change in strategy, and then your team goes and executes that.
exactly. You got
Okay.
it.
Okay. And then do you kind of keep them informed of regulations and different laws? So, for instance, you mentioned in some of those developing countries, the cost of labor used to be um, very cheap, and then it's going
Yeah.
up. And then I know we had we did some business in Dublin, and the tax laws there changed, and so that changed our modeling and forecasts and how profitable things were there. Do you kind of keep your customers informed on that, or is that more for the chief supply chain officer?
We try to keep them informed with some thought leadership there.
Yeah.
And they appreciate that, but it's not something that we really focus on. We focus more on the enablement and building flexible systems that can change as the world changes. And we were even starting to see that before COVID. I think you saw that with we have some expertise in the wine industry, and we saw that with Trump in office in the French wine. He put a big tariff on French wine right before the pandemic hit, and that was a double whammy if you were a wine importer. All of a sudden, restaurants are closing and not ordering wine, and and you have a higher cost at the same time.
Okay. So you're like the tactical execution arm of this whole operation.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. If someone were to come to your team, what type of information would be helpful to have right off the bat? If they can collect that, or like, here's what we always need to know about you and your company.
Right. Well, typically it's a list of systems that you have in place, some pain points with those systems, what you don't like
Mhm.
about them, um, If you have process flows, they're great, but you don't have to have those. If you have any standard operating procedures, but we realize a lot of small businesses don't.
Yeah.
Those are all things that we can work with you to build out through our project. Really, those are the main things. It's understanding, what your systems are. We want to know what kind of pain you're in. Oh, we also like to know, what is your plan for the business? Are you going to grow, 10x in the next 5 years? Are you going to grow 10% a year? Where are you planning to go? Because that really helps us. Sometimes we come into a small business and there's a lot of really experienced corporate people in there. We're like, okay, they're really planning to explode this thing. And then other times, we go into a small business and it's still very family run and
Right.
it's a different mindset.
And I mean, I think, and neither one of those is good or bad, but you have to know what
No,
you're getting into. Because I like how you
exactly.
mentioned some entrepreneurs, they know their end game. And so they're able to say, okay, I'm going to get a robust ERP in place now because I don't want to have to transition that thing. It's a pain in the butt to do that later on.
Right.
And I'm thinking I've been in private equity backed companies where like growth, like rapid growth, exponential growth is always top of mind. And then you do
Yes.
have these, mom and pop kind of lifestyle businesses where it's just a different game and a different goal altogether. So, okay.
Yeah. And we work with all of them. We just need to know what the
What
goals
are
are, right?
you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your goal?
Because if you're working with someone that's private equity backed, you're going to have, much more scrutiny over the
Oh,
financial results and the margins and the numbers. And you're really going to, that's going to be much more important than if you're working with a lifestyle business.
yeah, for sure. And I'm sure that you and your team can help pitch that or make that argument. Here's why it makes financial sense to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a big source of projects for us is when private equity companies buy small
Okay.
businesses. The first things they do is bring in people like us to upgrade the systems.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so you might do you partner with the private equity at the firm level, or do you just work with the companies and they happen to be backed
We've
by?
done both. We
Oh,
have a few relationships where we partner with them at the holdco level, and then they bring us in as soon as they purchase somebody to update the systems.
yes.
Yeah, and then there's other cases where we just work with a company, but we know there's a private equity firm kind of looking over our shoulder.
Yeah, gotcha. It's funny because I work with private equity firms, and I've been kind of smoke jump into different investments because I worked for them previously, and so they bring in the people they know, and it sounds like in some cases they bring in the systems they know and like as well. So when
That's
they
exactly right.
when they are the majority stakeholder, like, all right, let me bring in some known quantities here and figure out what works. So
Yeah, and most of them have a few different system integrator relationships that they'll use.
yeah.
And sometimes they'll even, like, there's one I'm thinking of, and every time they have new acquisition, they'll bring us in and another partner and have the two of us compete for the business.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Very
Yeah,
all right.
make
Well,
sure they
great.
get the best price.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. That's
Yep.
valid.
Yep.
But at least they bring you to the table. So very
Yeah.
cool. Greg, this, I have lots of different questions, but I think we've covered a high level overview for people and they have a sense of what you and your team does. So if they are interested, if someone's listening, it's like, oh yeah, that's something that we're looking at or something we should be looking at in the next 12 to 18 months, what is the best way to connect with you or learn more about what you and your team does?
Yeah, sure. So go to westerncomputer.com. We're proud of the fact that we have a ton of self-service content out there. So you can educate yourself without having to talk to a salesperson or anybody. And that's always popular. And then you can also find us on Western Computer on LinkedIn as well. We have content out there and we do webinars out there. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well if you're interested.
All right. And we'll have all of that information in the show notes. Greg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.